Hey my friends, welcome to the channel Baron History. And just before we get started, we flew one of these for 10 years. The one thing I just will say, love the Baron. The one thing you want to be mindful of is you don't want to get it into a flat spin because the tail is not big enough to get you out of it. So that's the one thing you got to know about a Baron. The first year of the Baron was 1961, and it was developed from the Beech 95 Travel Air, and the Travel Air had incorporated the fuselage of the Bonanza and the tail of the T-34 Mentor. And so when they developed the Baron, they replaced that straight tail of the Mentor with the Beech Debonair tail, and then they streamlined the engine nacelles, and they went to a six-cylinder engine, 260 horsepower. They went ahead. They were IO 470L engines. That, by going with the fully swept tail, the engine nacelles, and the high power, they were able to get into the range and speed of the Aztec, which had at the time 250 horsepower engines, and Cessna in 1959 had upgraded the 310 to fuel-injected IO 470Ds, which were also producing 260 horsepower. So in order to compete, they needed to be in that range. So the first Baron was the Model 55, and the fuselage it basically had was that of the Travel Air / Debonair. So it was a 4 to 5 place airplane at the time. And so the 55 is the short body version of the Baron. The 56 is a short body turbocharged version of the Baron, and then the 58 is the stretch, which is like the A36 Bonanza, club seating, all that kind of deal, barn doors. So early on, you had the 55, and then the A55 and the B55, and so all of them 260 horsepower engines, gross weights about right under 5,000 pounds, between 4,880 to 5,100, and the cruise speed about 190 knots at 7,000 feet. And fuel capacity, 116 to 136. Ours was 132 in our 1973 B-55. So the B-55 continued to be offered as the economy model until the end of the 55 model run in the 80s. And then you have the C-55, the D-55, and the E-55. All of those variants were 285 horsepower Continental IO 520 engines, and those had an increased cruise speed of about 200 knots, so another 10 knots, 230 miles an hour. Gross weight increased to 5,300 pounds, and the forward fuselage was lengthened by about a foot, and that allowed for more baggage. And then fuel capacities ranged from 136 to 166 gallons. And the Baron was sold with 4 seats in 2 rows of standard equipment. The 3rd row, 5th seat was optional initially, and then the 6th seat became optional on the A55. Anyways, we get into kind of the model years. So the 55s were produced from 1961 to 1983. There was about a little over 3,600 manufactured, 3,651 actually. And so the Model 55, they only built 190 units of those. And then the A55, which was built in 1962 to 1963. So the 55 model, the 61, was only produced for 1 year. And the improvements to the A55, it had an upgraded instrument panel, interior, different paint. It wasn't much that much different. Price at the time right around $59,000. So the B55, that was introduced in 1964 and ran all the way through 1982, and that was 4 to 6 seat variant. And like I said, ours was a 6-seater, but the 2 rear seats were like for little kids. I mean, you could stuff somebody back there, but it was cramped. B55 had a new exterior scheme and interior design, so new paint, new interior design, 120-pound increase in gross weight. As time went on with the B55, they ended up going to the speed slope windshield, your rotating beacon, that got located differently. They replaced the pilot side frame window with a solid glass, and the front a nose light was on the actual nose itself. They moved that down to the front gear, and so gave it a much more streamlined look. You could get a 3-bladed option. So that's the B55. And then the C55 was built from 1966 through 1967. 4 to 6 seats also, but again 285 horsepower, and so that was the big deal with that. They also lengthened the nose and accommodated more baggage, more avionics, and they also did that to improve the weight and balance. So that was a nice change. Alternators changed from a belt driven to a gear driven, and the C55, about 451 of those were built. And then the D55 from 1968 through 1969 introduced a new paint scheme, and that introduced the speed slope windshield, changed to 3-bladed props as standard, different flap configuration. There was 316 of those built. And then the E55 was introduced in 1970. So the E55 introduced in 1970. That had a long production run. So that was your 285 horsepower standard, and our neighbor had an E55, and I got to fly with them in that. 1970 through 1982, new paint, new interior, improved avionics, and improved panel. Wingtip lights, rotating beacon were made flush. Had a new entrance step. Also added up to 172 gallons of fuel, 166 usable. And the fuel in the E55, they're interconnected tanks with one fill cap per wing, and that became an option in 1976. That is really cool. That is really cool because, as we know, there are incidents with fuel management that people have issues with, and so to have that kind of range and just worry about one tank per engine per side, awesome. So the 56TC turbocharged. In 1967, that was introduced, and that was basically to compete with the 320 Skyknight. And at that time, the B60 Duke, or the Model 60 Duke, was being developed, and that was to go head-to-head with Cessna's 320 Skyknight. That was going to, of course, be a turbocharged 380 horsepower Lycomings and pressurized. So Beech wanted to experience working with and flying that engine. So the 56TC is an absolute monster. That was built between 1967 and 1971. There's not a lot of them out there, but I mean 380 horsepower engines. You still see a few of those today, but it was a test bed for the Duke, and it's a beast. It's loud. It had a structural strength increase, and thus it lost some empty weight to compensate for the higher power. And it was the fastest Beech aircraft piston that they had ever made. It would rival the early King Air sold at the time, and so but only 93 of those were actually built. So the 56TC, really impressive. Then there's the A56TC, and so that was introduced in 1970, built in 1971. Only one of those, one model change, there was only one model change throughout the 56 production, and that just featured new exterior paint scheme, new interior, new instrument panel, smooth rotating beacon and nav lights, nose wheel light, so it just cleaned it up, and there was only 11 of those manufactured, so that was the 56TC and the A56TC, short-lived. So in 1969, the Baron 58 was introduced, and that had 300 horsepower engines. The fuselage was that of an A36 Bonanza, so we know how that looks. So it's extended fuselage. Cruise speed of 200 knots. It had a gross weight of 5,400 pounds. And but the 10-inch stretch was the big thing. So incorporating the A36 fuselage, also introduced the rear fuselage doors, or what we call the barn doors, club seating, and eliminated the need for passengers to climb over the center seats or through the baggage door to get to the two rear seats. The fuselage was also repositioned forward of the wing to address an aft CG issue that had plagued the short body, the 55s. And even the 56. So the longer 58 fuselage made a big difference in that regard, and improved, the rear cabin access, as we talked about. And in 1976, Beechcraft introduced the Baron 58 TC turbocharged, and also a pressurized variant, the Baron 58P. and those were powered by a Continental TIO 520s of 310 horsepower on the 58 TC and 325 horsepower on the 58P, and gross weight increased between 61 and 6,200 pounds. So and they were also certified under a new type certificate. So the 58P, 58TC, both of those variants, they could cruise at 200 knots at 8,000 feet or 220 knots at 20,000 feet, and usually had about 190 gallons of fuel usable. In 1984, there was a major change made to the 58 Baron, and that was the instrument panel fully redesigned, and the center yoke throwover was eliminated to a conventional panel. The engine controls that were used to be mounted high on the instrument panel were then moved down to a standard position like a 310 or an Aztec. The right-hand yoke had partially blocked the radios, and the redesign provided a more industry standard control arrangement, increased panel space as well, so there was no longer an option for a single yoke. They also moved the flap and gear switches to the conventional position. So prior to that, the flap had been on the left, gear on the right. Now they moved it into a standard position. So that is a huge difference. So the 58TC and the 58P, they were discontinued in 84 on the turbocharged model and 85 on the P model. So if you want one of those that's got that upgraded instrument panel, you only got it 84 is the only year for the TC, and then 84 and 85 for the P. The G58 Baron was introduced in 2005 and currently still in production, and it features the Garmin G1000 glass cockpit, and of course that's been upgraded over the years since '05, but that's the standard, and that's what that G stands for, Garmin. To be in production that long, fairly impressive. But they've made some interesting airplanes. They did have a military version of the B-55. It was called the T-42A Cochise, and that was used as an instrument trainer, and the Army had about 65 of those, and then the Turkish Army had a few of those. All the way up until as late as 1993, they had some of those in the Army Reserve of the National Guard, but they're no longer anymore. And they also had a turboprop version of the 55 Baron at one point, and they called that the SF-60A Marquis. Never went into production, obviously. It was just to test it. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at some video. Yeah, so here we've got, this is a 1968 B-55 Baron. Here at the airport, we had a 73 B-55. And so, what did you like about the Baron, Dad?
Well, it was a pretty solid airplane in rough weather, and other than that, it was a little bit too narrow. But you still get 6 people in it, and fairly efficient fuel-wise, and it was about maybe 3 to 4 knots faster than my 310 with the same engines. Let's get a smaller airplane. Yeah, other than that, you know.
Yeah, it's a hot rod.
Yeah.
It's definitely a hot rod.
Yeah, well, mine had a throw-over control wheel in it.
Yeah, and you can get a dual.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing about the 68 here, you can see it's got a nose landing light on it, and the 73, it was actually down on the nose gear. This has got 3-bladed props on it.
I had somebody break in there.
Here's, it's got aux tanks and mains. Yeah, this poor thing's seen better days. So the Travel Air was the precursor to the Baron. Straight tail, 4-place. Yeah, so the Travel Air, it just did not have the performance that the Baron did to compete with the Cessna 310 and the Aztec, and so the Baron came from this of course coming from basically the Bonanza, and but this poor guy needs some work. Yeah, so the fuselage on this is basically a Bonanza fuselage, and you hear about the twin Bonanza, which is a lot bigger airplane, correct?
Yeah.
And it ended up becoming the Queen Air, which became the King Air. And this does have aux fuel and main tanks on it, as you can see here. 132 gallons usable. Is that correct? About 132 gallons?
That's what I recall.
With aux?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can take a look at the cockpit here a little bit. And you might be able to see that. It's kind of hard. Looks like it's got a GPS in there. And it does have the big baggage door,
Yeah.
which is really, really nice.
That's really handy.
It is. A good shot of the cowl flaps there. The gear is incredibly rugged. I mean, these have a tough gear on them, that is for sure. Got a nose luggage compartment, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that ended up changing, you can see here the pilot's window is framed, and they ended up replacing that with solid window, where you no longer have the frame around it at all. It's just clear, which I'm sure you've seen. So that I believe was just a couple years after this being in 1968.
We were flying back, and he was on my right seat, and I said to Dick, I says, "Hey, yeah, you want to fly it for a while?" And he said, "Sure." So I flipped over the wheel over to him, and he's flying. We were probably getting close to Pendleton. He's flying along, and all of a sudden he falls asleep. I had to grab the wheel and get it back. That was the second time he fell asleep. He fell asleep one other time in a car going to Paris, and we crashed into a guardrail.
Oh, good Lord, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway.
And that was obviously in the Baron. When was
Yeah.
that? That'd have been back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because you had yours, from about 83 to 93 or something?
Yeah, it's about
roughly?
right, 83 to 93, and then when I had that other business down in Portland, I was flying back and forth, but I was using my other airplane for that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well,
I don't think I ever put the gizmos on the wing, you know, the little...
vortex generators?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did put them on them.
No, that's okay.
They were on there. Remember we were doing that slow flight before we realized about the flat spin
Yeah.
characteristics?
Yeah.
We were doing power on stalls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really made a difference. It reduced the stall speed by about 6 or 8 knots.
And it was really docile too. I remember how smooth it was.
Yeah.
When you'd stall it. Yeah,
Yeah.
the vortex generators are
It was good.
a must-have. This was the precursor to the Queen Air, which became the King Air. You can see the resemblance. have you?
We put 2 new engines on it, new props, had it stripped and painted, all new avionics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's got all the new Garmin instrumentation in it. So
These are a performer. This is a good traveling machine. It really is. And what year is the? What year?
it's a 74.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, the panel looks fantastic.
Yeah,
You guys
it's
did a lot of work to it. Oh, yeah.
it's a fun machine to fly.
It really is. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
It's a altitude pre-select, the whole thing. You can put in here if you're flying IFR. You're going to do the nearest one departure. You put it in there, take it off, pull up the gear, and hit autopilot.
Your way you
It's gonna
go.
fly it. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, it looks good. Yeah, pretty.
Motors and gearboxes and new heater. Everything's pretty much new in the thing.
It looks, yeah, it does. It looks fully restored.
It's pretty much.
I mean, really.
I don't think there's anything left.
It's a B-55 Baron, and we had a 1973 B-55 Baron that we flew for about 10 years. And yeah, good bird. Similar performance to the 310, a little bit faster. This would be another one. This one's a little bit older. You can tell because it has the nose landing light, as you can see there. This is a 1960 something. Yeah, and it has a smiley face. That's always good. Yeah, Baron. That makes sense. And so with the high wing, yeah, the high wing's blocking your view.
Yeah.
G58 Baron.
With the low wing, you can see the runway.
Huh, interesting, yeah. That makes sense. Makes sense.
I had the 55.
Yep, yeah, this is a G58, just because of the panel, like the G36 Bonanza. Gives you a nice legitimate range, 202 knots, 1,480 nautical miles. 300 horsepower IO 550s. Great airplane, these really are. Very, very tough utility category, meaning you pull a few more G's, really good in turbulence, good IFR platform. We like the B-55, we flew a lot. What's that?
I had the hatch like this on mine,
Yeah.
and I was down at Santa Monica Airport and overnight on business, and some guy broke into the hatch and broke all the clips on it, and I had to duct tape it down to get home.
Oh, and then they stole a radio out of there, right?
Yeah, they did.
Wow.
Yeah.
That nose baggage compartment's pretty nice.
Yeah.
They still make these. You can still buy one of these brand new for a low fee of about 1.2 million.
Only 1.2?
1.2 million, yeah.
I'm short about 0.001 million.
going straight. I'm telling you, keep going straight. I'm telling you.
And
Get in it.
can you inbound, bring her down as much as feasible?
Morning.
Whoa, wide awake and ready.
And
Get in it.
can you inbound, bring her down as much as feasible?
Morning.
Whoa, wide awake and ready to
You
go.
turned off there, very good, thank you.
Slept good.
On final
I
here,
did
clear to
square when I
land
can, I
and
did it
land
to work.
past the VOR, turn right at the
Having some
field
problems with it?
taxiway
No,
on
it's
the hard
just
surface.
getting used to
That's
it. I
not
never
right
used
base,
it
you're
before.
cleared to land.
I haven't seen one exactly like it before.
Just over the blue water tower, you hear rock your wings. There's a Ford Tri-Motor below you and ahead of
Oh,
you.
so
That's who you'll be following. Ford Tri-Motor.
it's really compact, isn't it?
Right base.
Yeah, but then they get carry that thing around.
Clear to land, plan your turn off at the center.
So, Dad, you had this made. Was it a guy in Oshkosh or something?
Yeah, at Oshkosh. And I think it cost me about $350. He's really a heck of a job.
And this was like in 1986 or in the 80s for sure.
80, probably 88, I think.
Oh, that you had him. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, pretty neat. There's the Baron. That was a beautiful Baron too.
Oh yeah,
It really was.
flying into someplace in
Yeah,
Arlington.
I think that's me in there. Yeah, back with my mullet. There's a picture of us in the F-35 Bonanza. 2000. Looks like the year 2000. Yeah, here's the instrument panel of our B-55 Baron. Back from in the 80s. You see that Argus 5000 on the left? That was really cool, wasn't it, Dad?
Yeah, and this is what it was before.
Oh no, that's the Bonanza there.
What?
That one you're looking at.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me see that one.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the Bonanza. That's the Bonanza.